Abraham Lincoln, one of the most celebrated leaders in American history. We know him as the president who led the Union to victory and ended slavery. But what if I told you he was waging battles you never heard about? Battles that weren't just fought on the battlefield? Lincoln was facing a war behind the scenes. In this video, we're uncovering the hidden personal struggles that tested Lincoln's spirit and humanity. Ones kept so secret that few ever knew of them. We're not just talking about politics or warfare. This is about a man fighting his own mind, coping with unbearable grief, and somehow holding on to hope amidst relentless challenges. Stay with me because we're about to unravel Lincoln's most harrowing moments, ones he never allowed the public to see. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll see Lincoln in a whole new light. Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. That way you'll never miss out on the chance to discover more of history's untold secrets. Let me ask you this. What kept Lincoln going when his heart was breaking? And how did he hide these private battles from the public eye? Each of these questions will get answered as we dive deeper. First though, let's set the scene. Lincoln wasn't just battling the Confederacy. He was carrying the lives of thousands on his shoulders. The stakes were higher than they've ever been for any president before him. But what were the hidden costs of this enormous responsibility? The Civil War was a brutal chapter in American history, and no one understood this more than Abraham Lincoln. The psychological toll of the war didn't just weigh on his shoulders as a leader, but invaded his thoughts, tested his resilience, and at times, nearly broke him. Imagine reading news after news about young men lost on battlefields knowing that every life lost is on you. Lincoln experienced this daily, and each report came with the bitter sting of responsibility. The stress was enormous, and it fed directly into what we'd now call clinical depression. Back then, Lincoln called it melancholy. This wasn't a mild sadness or a passing mood. It was a condition that haunted him for years, even before the war. Have you ever wondered how someone dealing with depression could possibly function under such pressure? For Lincoln, it was more than a matter of bravery. It was survival. Throughout his presidency, he fought against his own despair. Some historians believe that his depression gave him an emotional depth that made him uniquely empathetic, a quality he leaned on as he faced each new catastrophe. But make no mistake, his depression often paralyzed him, and at times he found it nearly impossible to continue. He hid it well, but close friends like William Herndon saw the cracks. Lincoln once said he was the most miserable man living. What toll did this take on his decision-making? This brings us to a critical question. How did Lincoln's struggle with depression impact his leadership during America's darkest days? Let's keep unraveling this complex portrait of Lincoln, now as a leader dealing with unimaginable private pain. If the weight of the war was nearly crushing, Lincoln's family hardships only made the burden worse. Imagine grieving a child while leading a country through its bloodiest conflict. In 1862, Lincoln's son Willie passed away, a tragedy that shook Lincoln to his very core. Willie was just 11 years old, and his death left Lincoln in utter devastation. Many believe that this loss hit him even harder than his depression, leaving a wound that never healed. He wasn't just a grieving father. He was also a president who had to hold it together for the nation. But in the privacy of the White House, he mourned deeply, and his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, was also overwhelmed by grief. She had long struggled with her own mental health challenges, and Willie's death sent her into a spiral. Lincoln often had to support her, even as he fought his own battles. It's said he often walked alone in the White House late at night, unable to sleep, as he pondered the losses on both the home front and the war front. Can you imagine leading a nation through war, grappling with personal grief, and supporting a loved one's mental health all at once? The loss of Willie changed Lincoln, and he rarely spoke about it. Still, his anguish seeped into his public life. Friends observed a sadness in his eyes, an even deeper resolve. Did the loss of his son strengthen Lincoln's resolve to end the war? Many believe it did. As if the personal losses weren't enough, Lincoln faced relentless political pressure too. He wasn't just dealing with the Confederacy. Factions within the Union put immense strain on him. On one side, radical Republicans were pushing him to abolish slavery immediately. They wanted swift, uncompromising action, and they criticized Lincoln for being too cautious. On the other side, Northern Democrats, known as Copperheads, demanded peace with the South. They saw the war as a mistake, and they accused Lincoln of destroying the country. Lincoln had to tread a fine line, balancing abolitionist ideals with the political realities of a divided nation. His challenge was to keep the border states loyal while moving forward on emancipation, a near impossible task. But he did it. How did he manage to balance these competing demands? What inner strength allowed him to push through, even as his allies and opponents alike pulled him in different directions? This is one of Lincoln's most overlooked struggles, the constant push and pull from people who wanted him to lead in different ways. And he had to do it all while managing the war and a fragile home life. One of Lincoln's most monumental decisions was signing the Emancipation Proclamation. But behind this groundbreaking move lay immense personal struggle. Lincoln knew that this single act would redefine the war. It wasn't just about reuniting the country anymore. It was about transforming it. But with this decision came serious risks. Some worried the proclamation would alienate the border states and drive them to the Confederacy. Others feared it would provoke violent backlash from pro-slavery supporters in the North. Did Lincoln have doubts? Was he ever tempted to hold back? These questions add depth to our understanding of him. Lincoln recognized that his choice could mean more bloodshed, more suffering. Yet, he chose to go forward, driven by a sense of moral duty. But that didn't mean he was at peace. The weight of the decision haunted him, and he confided in close friends about his fears. So, did Lincoln ever regret his decision to pursue emancipation? By all accounts, he didn't. But the cost was one he bore alone. As a leader of the Union, Lincoln wasn't just dealing with pressure. He was facing physical danger. In fact, assassination threats became a regular part of his life. One story goes that Lincoln narrowly avoided an attempt on his life when he was traveling to Washington. There were countless threats from those who despised his leadership, and as the war dragged on, the threats only increased. What drove him to take such personal risks, knowing he was a target? Was it courage, or did he simply see no other option? The risks didn't seem to faze him outwardly. He even joked about it to friends, brushing off the dangers. But as the war reached its climax, the reality of his vulnerability must have set in. We can learn so much about Lincoln's inner life from his private letters and notes. These reveal a man who was deeply reflective, often grappling with the weight of his decisions. One entry reads, "If there be those who would not save the Union unless they could at the same time save slavery, I do not agree with them." In these words, we see his steadfast resolve, despite his personal battles. Did Lincoln ever believe he'd live to see a peaceful United States again? In his letters, we sense hope, but also a quiet resignation. He was preparing himself for the worst, yet hoping for the best. Lincoln's story doesn't end with his assassination. His legacy lives on, shaped not only by his achievements, but by the personal struggles he endured. Would Lincoln's legacy be the same without these battles? Many say no. It was his resilience, his empathy, and his unbreakable spirit that set him apart. If this video gave you a new perspective on Abraham Lincoln, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe.